This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friends with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge. We're going to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, relationships, intimacy, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Ooh, can't help myself. Anyway, we're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up, you're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we dive in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content in Naarm, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're ready, let's flap and do this. Oh my God, is there such thing as too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever, it's my podcast. I'm leaving it in.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up a couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey gang, just before we jump into this episode, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to access my new mini course for free before I start charging for it in future. It's for people with vulvas and it's quick to complete. It's all about demystifying the female body and pleasure anatomy and getting some basic fundamentals to understand your body better. It's called Pussy Pleasure Secrets, Your Roadmap to Bedroom Bliss. You can grab it on the freebies page of my website or in the show notes. It's a great little free resource to kind of dip your toe in or act as a bit of a taster for my work. So if you've ever been curious about this sort of thing and you just don't know where to start, or you want a really quick, easy, accessible, non-threatening way to get the ball rolling and start working on this stuff, this is a great place to start. What's up, my labial love bugs? Welcome back to the lounge. Today we're going to be talking about autism and ADHD and sort of general neurospiciness and relating. So dating, being in relationships, how to navigate certain challenges, and also maybe some of the sort of hidden and little known gifts that can come with being as my guest calls it, neuroqueer, and having to really get to know yourself super fucking well so that you can navigate these things. Sometimes there's like a silver lining to some of the challenges when we learn how to master and navigate these situations. So my guest, can I call you Lil? And how do I pronounce your full name? Anna Lil?
So my name actually rhymes, Lil Desille, but you can just call me Lil. It makes it a bit easier.
Oh my God, Anna Lil Desille. That is amazing. So Lil is an AuDHD, intimacy and relationship-focused clinical psychologist, using their personal experiences along with clinical expertise in the field to work with neurodivergent individuals. Her special interests include neurodivergence, mind-body connection, sexual health, dating, intimacy, and all things relationships, attachment, and spirituality. She holds her Certificate 3 and 4 in fitness, Master of Clinical Psychology, Postgraduate Diploma of Psychology, Bachelor of Psychological Science, and Reiki Level 2 certification. Damn! She utilizes her array of knowledge and passion for all things sex, relationships, and intimacy to support neurokin with their ability to deepen and strengthen connections together. Lil has developed and created incredible resources as well as events and courses that are tailored specifically to the AuDHD community, which have been complemented for their level of inclusivity, adaptability, and resourcefulness. Welcome, Lil. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Thank you. I'm excited to chat too. Yay!
So good. Okay, so I'm assuming people that are listening to this probably know, but like I had only heard AuDHD like in the last couple of years. This is like a combo of autism and ADHD.
Yeah.
And I guess like for many, something that I've noticed in all of my peers and clients is that a lot of people are getting pretty like late in life diagnoses, and people especially like born into female bodies seem to be getting diagnosed really late. And it's only now that there's like an increasing kind of understanding and awareness of how neurodivergence can show up, especially, how it shows up differently in sexes. And I'm curious, like, what's been your journey with that? When did you receive a diagnosis? And yeah, actually, no, I'm just going to stop doing the thing where I ask double-headed questions, let you answer that one, and then I'll have another one for you.
No, that's brilliant. That's actually how I work therapeutically. And I'm like, sorry, answer any one of those 10 questions I gave you. So I love that so much. But my journey, I'm a late diagnosed baddie as well. So I actually went on a binge eating trial study in like 2018, and they were trialing Vyvanse. And the clinician who was like, I guess, moderating and watching over the research study was like, have you noticed like you're a lot more concentrated and calm? And I was like, yeah. And I feel like I was getting like 90s compared to like my 60s and 70s grades. And they were like, maybe we should consider looking at ADHD. And I was like, yeah, that tracks. Cool. So we did that. And that was a whole journey and a half, and a lot of grief, I think, simultaneously with the euphoria, ups, downs of late identification. And then came the autism awareness, where I actually had, I feel like most Audis that are diagnosed first with ADHD, we tend to have like, it's like an initiatory autistic person that just bluntly and directly says, have you considered that you're autistic? And I've been that person for way too many people, and I feel very bad about it, but c'est la vie. We move through it and then we break through our little selves. But I had a fellow autistic colleague who was like, have you considered that you're actually autistic as well? And I was like, no. And I had so many preconceived notions and ideas of what autism actually looked like. So I didn't feel that it resonated. And then this clinician's like, stop taking the DSM so fucking literally. This might actually be resonant. And I was in not necessarily denial, because I'm quite open-minded, but I was a little bit resistant to the idea, and self-diagnosis is completely valid. But at the time I wasn't there yet for myself. So I went and did an assessment, and I think in 2021 I was actually formally diagnosed and identified.
Wow.
And since then, I guess it's been really about putting my own identity in with the work that I'm doing as well, and how that kind of cross transfers. But yeah, so late diagnosis in short.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like I've heard from a couple of friends. Actually, Hannah probably is a big culprit for this. Hannah, if people haven't listened to the multiple episodes I've done with Hannah Demarise, she's one of my besties and has is on the spectrum and also has ADHD, also late diagnosis. We did an episode on ADHD and sex and an episode on autism and sex. We've done various other episodes, but yeah, definitely check them out. She's a fucking weapon. And she's classic for just being like, so have you considered? And she's like, yeah, if you look at like all of your friends, are like a lot of them, neurodivergent. I'm like, yeah, pretty much all of them. Like, and she's like, well, that's a pretty big indicator that you might be somewhere in that sort of neurospicy realm. And I don't have a diagnosis. I don't actually feel like I align with quite a lot of, and this is me maybe being in denial, but I've talked at length with Hannah, and I have talked to a psychiatrist, but yeah, I have a lot of stuff that I feel like could definitely be potentially a bit autistic or a little bit ADHD, but none of it really fits. It's like I'm definitely something. I'm definitely on some sort of spectrum, but I feel like the spectrum is more of a sphere, and I'm just like, or a Venn diagram, and I'm somewhere in there. But then it's like, is it introversion? Is it trauma? Is it, like just the craziness of life being so fucking hard these days, and just in a very unnatural way that we're not designed to function in? Is it a combination of all of that? Is it just like high chronic stress? So yeah, it's always so valuable when someone like Hannah kind of points out some things, you know, certain sensory sensitivities or certain ways that like I function and my brain works. And I'm like, wow, okay, it's helpful, even though I don't, you know, have a diagnosis. And I think if anything, it would be relatively mild. So I don't feel like there's any urgency to go get a diagnosis, but it's helpful to start to reflect on these things in a new light and kind of be like, wow, maybe I'm not just a weird, broken thing that doesn't know how to function in society. Maybe I'm just, you know, there are actually reasons why I find it more difficult than other people to navigate certain situations, you know. There could be some serious like reasons for this. So I'm sure it was quite validating for you, even though there was a grieving process. And of course, it's quite confusing and overwhelming. And I know Hannah found it quite confronting when you kind of come out the other side of integrating that new knowledge of yourself. It's like super fucking validating and refreshing, right?
Yeah, 100%. It definitely is. And, you know, I had similar mentality of, you know, I am this broken thing with weirdness attached to it. But yeah, for me, it was definitely consolidating, I guess, the final pieces of, oh, this makes sense and how it comes into my identity. And, you know, I would probably err on the side of it's probably a combination of all, as where, you know, that tends to be the case for those who are aware that they are presenting with certain quirks and traits but don't fully align. It could just be all of the above potentially. Yeah, it's a very odd process, I think, with identification, but I think it's only important if you're someone that wants to seek out the identification for your understanding of your identity more. But if you're someone that's quite self-solid and self-knowing, you don't necessarily need the label. It might just be helpful to know things about your sensory profile, like you said, or things about, you know, your communication preferences, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so helpful, so helpful. There's a lot of like lingo in that space that I've kind of adopted because I'm like, oh, that, like whether I'm on the spectrum or not, that really helps to have a word for the thing. And yeah, I'm curious like what you think. I know some people are of the opinion that more and more people are being born with or developing autism or ADHD in modern times, and some people like that it's actually increasing in prevalence, and some people believe that it's not increasing in prevalence, we're just diagnosing it more frequently because it's now recognized more, there's more awareness in the medical field, in the mainstream. Do you have any like thoughts on that?
I do, and I have like research to back it up. It's
Right,
not
perfect.
a myth of random people that are getting like diagnosed and all of a sudden we have all of these autistic ADHD babies. Like that's a very, I think that breeds into the fear mongering space for a lot of people that then start to become suspicious. It's that the literature tends to catch up with community about 10 to 15 years later. So we're having a surge only now because the literature is only just coming out around predominantly with what you were saying earlier, people born into female bodies. That's where the literature is currently at. So when we actually look at it, it's sort of like a graph. And for those that are just listening into audio, think of like a steady arch that's making its way up in terms of like a graph line from the X and Y. I don't know which axis is on what, but an arch, so to speak. Basically, it's like here in terms of the diagnostic prevalence rate. And we're like at this peak here. So we're only just here because the literature is finally catching up, but it turns into a baseline. And so it's going to start evening itself out very, very soon. We've been talking about overdiagnosis for like 5 years now. That is no longer overdiagnosis when it's continuing at a steady rate. If anything, it's just we're actually maintaining and we're identifying people now. You know, there's an influx of people who were late diagnosed because the literature wasn't there yet. So I am very firm with the belief, like objectively, it's 1 in 34, 1 in 32 to 1 in 34 individuals in general population that are autistic. And the I think that translates out to about 3% of the general population. And then ADHD is about like 7 to 8%, give or take, of the general population. And so when you think about that, that's actually a pretty significant amount of the population. So is it really unrealistic to say that maybe we're actually just identifying more people and then that's, more accurate depiction of where the graph is sitting? Yeah, of course. I don't think we're also counting in for the fact that we were looking predominantly at stereotypes that were predominantly looked at for assigned male at birth individuals.
Yeah, that's it. And it's like, it's pretty easy to pick up on in like a young boy some of the more classic symptoms or like indications of ADHD, of autism. But girls mask pretty freaking effectively, and we're socialized to learn how to mask effectively from such a young age. Like, do you feel like there's, and actually, yeah, like, so, I'm wondering about, I don't know how to phrase this question. When, okay, I'll use myself as an example. So like, I probably wouldn't have even crossed my mind about being neurodivergent for most of my life, probably because I didn't have any information. And I also just assumed it was like this very sort of stereotypical, like narrow presentation that you see in boys and that we get kind of sold as the only way that it can look. But I also feel like as I've moved through life, I've become increasingly more sensitive and more affected by things that didn't used to affect me. And I think that that's probably like, trauma and chronic stress and just hardships and challenges, and the world just being harder to exist in. But I'm also wondering, like, is there cases where like there's an existing sort of neurodiversity or maybe like a susceptibility, and then circumstances can then aggravate it and bring it out more intensely in people, so it almost seems like it's developing later in life, but it might have been there all along. It's just that it's been, I don't know, triggered or something. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And so what I will say is sort of yes and no, and I'm only going to be finicky on the language because it's the semantics of it that is important here. So masking is accounted for, and I want to make a note to say that there's no boy or girl autism or ADHD. It's usually an internalized or an externalized profile. An internalized is usually that high masking profile where it's quite subdued, but internally that experience and that inner world is quite disrupted, or externalized where we might see, more active stimming in public, or maybe that, that ability to mask might not be as prominent. And it is technically an ability because some people do not have that capacity or the ability to learn that skill. Now, when it comes to demands outweighing resources, that is actually part of the DSM criteria. And look, the DSM is good for kind of pointing in the right direction rather than being literal, like I have mentioned before in my own interpretation of the DSM. But it says if demands exceed resources, we will see more signs of distress. The DSM is based on signs of distress, really, because there are plenty of autistic people without trauma that have not been identified because maybe they have a supportive home environment, or they have all the accommodations that are sort of around them and needed, where they just look like your everyday kid, and they are your everyday kid. What we see based on the DSM is distress behaviors are the cue for us for identification, which should never be the case. And I mean, I could go into a whole neurodiversity affirming paradigm spiel about how the pathology medicalizing model is useless, but I will save that for another day. That aside, the really important thing here is looking at it from a lens of, okay, let's say you've had trauma. Trauma doesn't precede an autistic personality trait or anything like that. You're born autistic. You're born with ADHD. Those are just neurotypes. So we have different brains. And so you are more likely and more susceptible to experiencing trauma as an individual that is neurodivergent. That unfortunately, is something that comes in with that. That comes from like micro traumas in intimate, but also in interpersonal relationships as you're building them as you get older. It can be familial trauma. Like we can have so many different things depending on if your parents are identified as well, or, you know, all of those things. So you've got all of that context, but a lot of the time we see that people that are autistic tend to start to crack and break down, usually in high school as one of the early stages, because that's when things start to get a bit trickier on an educational social front. We might see it in the transition to university, and we might see it in postpartum experiences and perimenopause and menopause, the really pivotal, I guess, stages of both puberty, matrescence, all those kinds of different things, which I think are so crucial because that's when our hormones are fluctuating with our neurotype.
Yeah. Intense times.
In short, stress essentially can create, distress behaviors become more prominent, more sensitivities to the world around us, all of those things. So yes, but it's more tied to demands outweighing the resources that we have.
Yeah, which I guess just makes sense for like literally every single person. Like, cool. I'd love to dive into some stuff around specifically like relating, dating, flirting, all of this stuff. When you have, and actually, can I asked Hannah this, but you're a great person to ask. When I use language around this, I feel like it's changed quite a bit and I'm not super up to date. Is it still okay to say like, neurotypical or atypical and neurodivergent and things like that? Like I've noticed there's like lots of new terms coming out and I'm like, all right, which is the one? What are the ones that are cool to say?
Neurodivergent is definitely cool to say. Neurotypical is cool to say, but I think it's about getting specific. Autism and ADHD are not the only forms of neurodivergence. So just being mindful of that, because if you have trauma, you have neurodivergence. If you have schizophrenia, you're a neurodivergent. If you have bipolar, you're a neurodivergent. Like there's so many different things. And 50% of the population are neurodivergent. So it's, I guess, being mindful of the language in terms of what you're trying to represent. The community and the neurodiversity affirming paradigm really does prefer identity first language. So an ADHDer, an autistic person, as opposed to person with autism. Cool. But ask the individual. So if they prefer to go by person with autism, then honor that. But more broadly, it is a identity first preference.
Okay, amazing. Very helpful. So with regards to relationships and dating, specifically with like autism and ADHD or a combo, what are some of the common challenges that people are facing when they're trying to, let's start with like trying to actually date and flirt and like get into a relationship in the first place or have, relations, and then we can get into like couple stuff.
Sure. So thinking early phases of dating, first thing that comes to my mind are the sensory and the communication differences. So for autistic individuals, going out to have to meet humans is already challenging for some of us. Not all of us. Some of us are very social seeking, but we might struggle with certain cues or picking up what people mean, including flirting. I've had many people think that I am flirting with them when I am not flirting with them. I am just stimming and like twirling my hair while I'm trying to listen to concentrate. And the amount of times people are like, are you flirt? I'm like, I'm going to put my hand back now and I'm going to put my hands behind my back so that you're not going to misinterpret and misinfer. Or the other side where I am flirting, and then it's completely misinterpreted as just someone who's like super passionately involved in conversation. So I think that cues, flirting, all of those kinds of things can be kind of challenging based variably, right? And this is important to note as well, that when you just described that you don't see it so much as like a line, but you see it as a sphere, it is a sphere. So some people might not have too much difficulty with the social communication element. Some people might actually be high masking, or they might be able to be like, I sound very charismatic right now. But if I spoke to you in my usual voice like this, it would probably sound like a drone and get a little bit boring. But because it's a special interest, my voice does peak up. But if I'm talking about anything else, it won't. So it's really variable in that way. But I think part of the challenge can be misinterpretation of cues, quite largely. Miscommunication, the sensory component, so thinking about where you're going out. So if you're a sensory seeker, you will probably thrive better in dating environments because of the novelty and going out and doing things. But if you're someone that's maybe a bit more introverted or quite sensitive to your sensory environment, you might get overwhelmed with busy people and places, auditory processing when people are talking all at the same time at a restaurant. I'm eavesdropping on about 8 different conversations, but not listening to you at the same time. That's great. That kind of stuff can be really prominent, which can make people feel a little bit disconnected without even realizing what's actually happening at the time. If there's bright lights overhead or there's too loud music, just having to concentrate and try to hear and focusing in your attention can be really, really challenging. There's so many different things. Being late to dates or being too early to dates as well, when we're thinking about time agnosia, like that management of time and how we can perceive time, is a really important one, more dominantly for ADHDers. We've got so many different things, impulsivity and a little bit of risk taking, which can happen. So we might be happy and willing to jump into the sack without fully establishing safety with a human or gauging and garnering whether they are a person that we can, safely do that with and be intimate with. I know I've done that probably more times than I should count out loud, so I won't. But I've definitely been there. I think there's a lot of, there's so many different facets because with neurodiversity and neurodivergence more broadly, every trait that we have will somehow have the same offset in our intimate relationships, whether they're just sexual, platonic, or, even in familial networks as well. So it'll vary, but social, executive functioning, focus and concentration, those tend to be the biggest kind of domains that I see in the dating phase. And also the drop-off effect, forgetting to write people back, especially if you're someone that's using dating apps. Some people find it easier to talk online, and then when they get into those face-to-face dynamics, they're shutting down and they're really struggling to actually speak. So there's a lot of differences, and I think it really does vary and depend on what kind of human you are.
Yeah, beautiful. And so, what about when we're in a relationship? What are some of the things that people come to you for support with? Common challenges or sort of ways that, like hiccups that we sort of have along the way when, and I suppose it's different if there's one person that's neurotypical and one person that's not, or both being neurospicy. So feel free to talk on either of those combinations. But would love to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, totally. So the funny thing is, more often than not, neurodivergents gravitate towards neurodivergence. If you're with neurotypical, might be worth considering if you actually are or not. Just as a little gentle nudge rather than you're blatantly autistic out loud. But worth considering. The common thing, so we have a lot of overlap with neurotypicals as well, right? So mismatched sex drives is usually going to be a really common one. Effort, time, energy, kids and intimacy after kids, all of those kinds of things we have just the same because, we're not aliens, even though some of us do feel like it. But the more specifically, I guess, tied to partnerships that I do see that either are presenting both neurodivergent or maybe a neurotypical and a neurodivergent, it comes back to those same things that I said before. So your social, your sensory, your executive function. This might be partners that are really struggling with the domestic load. That's a really common one, and that's usually due to a mismatch of whether one partner is more cleanly and organized and meticulous as opposed to one that's like, oh, I'm a bit more blasé and chill with where things are. Structure of the domestic load is huge, and it's not gendered as much as I see with more neurotypical partnerships and with hetero partnerships as well, which I think is just fascinating. I see a lot of couples that have communication difficulties, and usually it's tied to them both saying the same fucking thing. It's really, really funny when a couple comes in and says the same thing, and I'm just sitting there going, are you both listening to each other at all? And usually no, the answer is no, because their trauma is getting in the way. But that's usually one of the things, of miscommunication, but trying to get onto the same page and alignment. Sensory challenges, which definitely come at a cost on their social and their intimacy life as well, depending on if you have a high masking partner that has a either low masking or even a neurotypical partner. There's a lot of mismatches there too that I do commonly see. But the biggest thing I think is communication and really understanding how to navigate life together in a way that feels balanced across all of those domain functions.
And what if, one, because I mean, and this is so like simplistic when I'm thinking about this, so please like correct me, but I'm almost sort of trying to put myself in like, your average neurotypical person's shoes with some of these questions. People with autistic people are kind of known for being really blunt and maybe not sugarcoating things and actually just speaking their mind. Obviously, that's not across the board. But what if you have two autistic people that are in a relationship and they're both being really blunt and transparent with their communication and their needs? And like, wouldn't that actually be helpful? Or is it more when there's like an ADHD with an autistic, like, what do you think of all that?
So a few things. The first thing is that, yes, you're right. Two blunt autistic people are going to communicate more effectively. Yeah, that's actually a thing. And that's called the double empathy problem. So Crompton did a whole bunch of research on communication styles. And so they identified allistic people, and that just means anyone that's not autistic, autistic people, and then they got autistic people and autistic people to communicate. They got allistic people and allistic people to communicate. And then they got autistic and allistic people to communicate. Mm-hmm. And what they found is there is actually a miscommunication. There is a gap. There is something that is just left of center where we are not necessarily communicating effectively. No matter how much either side tries to communicate and understand, there is still a rift. And so neurotypicals and allistics, they can communicate just fine. And autistics can communicate just fine. That being said, there's still going to be miscommunications within groups, but there is less of that rift that is obvious by comparison with autistic and allistic people.
Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like whether I'm on the spectrum or not, I'm like a fucking weapon at communicating, and I'm very good at being quite I think of it as being clear and kind over nice. Like I'm not gonna, do like be nice and actually sacrifice being clear and kind, which is being honest. And yeah, when I meet another person that's like on that wavelength, it's just dreamy. It's like, oh, what the actual fuck? Like, this is how smooth this can be. And often it's because they're on the spectrum, they're actually just able to fucking get rid of all of the fluffy stuff and say the thing. And like, I, make a real effort to do that. And I find it so refreshing and even like, relaxing. Like it puts me at ease when another person is also able to communicate to that degree of like, just transparency. And it frustrates me to no end when people can't and they're just so hell-bent on, well, it's not their fault. It's not that they're doing it deliberately, but like with all this people-pleasing shit and sugarcoating things and beating around the bush and just sort of like, pussyfooting around saying the actual fucking thing. And I'm like, this is murky. This sucks. We could have spent like 2 minutes and gotten to the heart of it if you would just meet me in a place of like transparent communication. And I find it really frustrating, but like that's quite common, especially with like neurotypical people, because we've learnt to basically, people please, not say no, not actually give people the truth. And then you get obviously ghosting and all of this stuff because people are so afraid to actually just be clear and kind with their honesty. So I imagine that it can actually be like a real strength in relationships when you have the same sort of neurotype and the same communication style.
It definitely can. And I think what you just communicated was a really good point to highlight as well what masking can do. So masking also bleeds into that people pleasing, social passivity and nicety. But that is actually just how neurotypicals communicate. It's not them being nice for the sake of keeping it, like the social thing, like they actually find that naturally comes to them as part of their communication style, which for me, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I was putting it on the entire time. Can't you just take the mask off? Turns out, no, they can't, because that's actually how they operate. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just means it's a difference in communication style. And once I learned that, I was like, oh, well, I'm just not going to try so hard with my communication. I'm going to be blunt and direct as I need to be. And they can talk passively. I mean, I don't really interact with many neurotypicals anymore, if I'm being honest. And not by like choice, not by choice. That sounds like I'm cutting them out of my life. I'm not. I just mean like my work, I'm working with autistic ADHDers. I hardly leave the house, and all my friends and family members are neurodivergent. So I just don't associate with them unless I'm like at a wedding, or if I've gone out to a public setting, I'm not interacting with them so much. So I don't need to have the filter on as much.
Yeah. Oh, what a dream. Cool. Let's do the segment Get Pregnant and Die. Do you have a sex ed anecdote for us about your sex ed? Maybe something that it was lacking, maybe something that it did well, maybe just like a funny story. What you got?
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
Totally. Not a funny story. I'm never a funny story person. I'm so sorry. But I definitely have like a what was lacking. What I would have loved, because my sex ed was actually fairly comprehensive in terms of like STIs, STDs, safe sex, pregnancy, like the general heteronormative bullshit, right? But it was comprehensive in the way that I sought out research. So Sexplanations, Dr. Lindsay Doe, my heart, oh my goodness, found a video on YouTube on how to flirt. So I actually learned from a very young age how to flirt. And that's what set me off on the catalyst of like sexology as the whole field of interest. And so I got most of my sex ed online compared to school. One thing that I wish school had taught me though was identifying, firstly, queer relationships and queer sex I think needs to be added to a curriculum as a bare minimum. But about knowing who is safe and how to identify safe people to be intimate with, and not that you have to be in a relationship with them, not that that there has to be love necessarily, but there needs to be the bare basics of respect and privacy and care and trust over time to show these kinds of things, because that was something that I really do think I could have benefited from, and especially for AuDHDers who don't always know their bodies or say yes if they're high masking. I think it's really important to understand what a no feels like in your body, what an unsafe person looks like and feels like in its more concrete form, because that's such a vague and amorphous little blob of what is a safe human. And so I feel like that dialogue was really missing in school. So I was a bit disappointed by that.
Yeah, big time. Oh my God. Can you imagine if they were teaching something as useful and practical as those skills of like discernment?
Well, I made a whole course on that, but yeah, we're lacking so much still in schools today. It's disappointing, but I think there's a few groups that are coming out into schools now that are talking a little bit more. So that feels a bit more comforting.
Hey, baby babes. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that I'd love you to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. There you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies, behind the scenes, or discounts for offerings from guests who have been interviewed on the podcast. There'll also be, hopefully, inspiring, thought-provoking conversations and support from a community of labial legends like yourself. My vision for this is that it becomes a really supportive, educational and hilarious resource for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes or look up the Labia Lounge group in Facebook, and I'll see you in there. And now back to the episode. Let's chat a little bit about like how, how we actually navigate being in a relationship and dating, like, I guess, to minimize the challenges or the effects that the neurodiversity might have. Like one thing that I love that you talk about is like pockets. So you can go into that if you want. But yeah, like what are some strategies that you commonly give people when they come to you for some support with dating or being in a relationship?
So the biggest thing is really understanding and learning about themselves. Ultimately, that's how it comes back to that for everything. What is it about yourself that you need to either understand or have more insight on into how you take yourself into any connection or relation that you are entering into? And by that, I mean, know what your sensory preferences are. If you don't, if you're going to get overstimulated in certain environments, you're not going to be fully present and your body's going to feel it later. So for one, you're going to be dysregulated. Two, you're not going to be fully present with a person when you're with them. So you're also not going to be, your best self. So learn your sensory preferences, learn your sexual preferences as well. This doesn't mean just blindly following porn or things that you've been exposed to but don't actually know. The biggest thing you can do is learn about your body, look in a mirror, play with yourself, figure out if you even like playing with yourself, or if you just prefer to be intimate with partners, that's fine too. But learn what it is that you actually want and what you actually like. And that might take a bit of experimentation, and that's okay. Same with communication. You want a certain outcome, you're going to need to communicate it with your words. I think it's really, really hard when people don't know the ways that they communicate best. What happens when you're shutting down or having a meltdown? Okay, cool. What do you need? Some people like really deep physical touch and pressure. Some people need you to back the fuck off and leave them alone. That's going to be important when you're in partnership and you're having a meltdown or a shutdown and you need a partner to either support you or leave you alone. You need to learn about yourself. And I think a lot of people forget that healing is relational, right? So we still need to learn about ourselves through others as well. So that's not saying know yourself and don't date anyone until you're ready. That's a know enough about yourself so that when you enter into contexts and situations with other people, you can advocate for yourself. You can advocate whether you like or don't like something without having to have all of these shields that are protecting you. Also, I'm here for the kitty cat. My cat might any point too.
He's usually pretty good at I set him up with a little hot water bottle on the bed and stuff, but he's just decided to perk up. Knocked my microphone. Yeah, I think and I guess that goes for any neurotype, is like knowing yourself well enough to know what your needs are and when, and then how to communicate them. I feel like there's it's one thing to know yourself and know what you need. It's another to be able to communicate them in the moment when you're dysregulated, when you're up against, this conditioning that is basically trying to tell us, especially people born into female bodies, like tell us that we shouldn't have needs and we shouldn't be too bossy or demanding or high maintenance or needy. And so I feel as though you can know yourself incredibly well and know what you need when you're not in the moment being dysregulated. Then the next step is to learn to recognize it on the fly in the moment and go, oh, okay, actually. And I have this I have this with regards to my social battery. Like it used to be that I would just go way beyond the point of no return before I would kind of realize. Yeah. And then I just fucking shut down and I have to just immediately smoke bomb and go read a book in the car or just go home. And if I have to be in the social setting or in the conversation or out of my comfort zone in my bedroom for 1 second longer, I feel like I'm going to fucking blow my top. Maybe I am neurodivergent. But yeah,
thing, but have you considered
and yeah, now I'm a little bit better at And then in retrospect, I can reflect on that and be like, oh, okay, I see what happened there. Probably I needed to catch that a little bit earlier and go and, do something to kind of, regulate. But then you can kind of get better at knowing in the moment. Like I take my Kindle everywhere with me, everywhere. Like I will have a meltdown if I don't have it. If I'm staying the night somewhere, if I'm at a festival or even like a party that goes for quite a long time, I'll like go and have a little kip in the back of my van with my book and just like chill for a bit and then recharge and then head back in. But then comes the like either the masking or the people pleasing or I guess for me, like feeling like it's not okay for me to make demands or have needs, because if other people are around and they're expecting a certain, amount of like participation or input from me, it's really challenging sometimes to like assert what I need in that moment. And I know a lot of my friends who are AuDHD or ADHD or autistic have like a lot of trouble, I guess just like owning that they have needs, and they all go so far beyond what they've got capacity for to save the other people's feelings or to just appear to be, quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
And then they sacrifice so much of their own well-being for the sake of masking in front of other people and people pleasing. And it's really devastating because it's so often, the burden or the onus is on the neurospicy person to make that situation comfortable for those around them, and they have to sacrifice their own comfort. So, I mean, I'm very good now at just being like, I don't want to be in this conversation anymore. Goodbye.
Love that.
Oh,
We need to be able to self-advocate. I think that's so important. And yeah, you're right. A lot of us do overcompensate and we do try to meet people beyond where we're at. I think thankfully I have the brand of neurodivergence because I also have a PDA profile where I've just not ever given that much of a fuck. And that in itself is a bit of a protective mechanism, I think. I definitely did for a while, and that was when I was in my early adolescence and early adulthood. I think that was, time that most people tend to be identifying who they surround themselves with, their identity, and that concept of self-formation was happening at the time. But bar that, I think I've pretty been, sorry, I'm unmedicated today. I don't know if that's noticed. But it's been pretty much the journey from, I'd say, early mid-20s where I've just been like, no, I'm not working harder than I need to. The right people will fall if they do into the place of my life, which would be amazing. And if they're not, then bye. We get one life from what I'm aware of. I mean, if we get if there's reincarnation, I stand corrected, and I'm happy. I'm open to see how that happens. But I truly do believe that why waste the one life that we have on interacting, overcompensating, not doing the things that I actually would like to do with my life, and dealing with people that I don't want to deal with, that don't treat me well. And I think that takes a little bit of a while because there's a lot of deconditioning that we need to do, because neurodivergents do experience more negative commentary most of our lives. And so there was a lot of unlearning that needed to be done in order to get to this space. But the minute that mask comes off, makes life substantially easier. And to some extent, it makes it harder because you're still working against a neurotypically built system, let alone colonialist, patriarchal, like all the things as well. That's even broader in its systemic value there. But it does help with your self-identity and at least giving you spoons back for what to invest your into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the most tricky thing for me, and just for everyone that doesn't know, PDA, pathological demand avoidance, you can give a rundown on that in a sec if you feel like it. It's like a profile of autism. But I probably have it, honestly, because I don't give a fuck. But I'm very empathetic. So it's like weird because the thing that I struggle with is like I'm going to be very blunt and very clear with people. However, I'm very emotionally aware and I care about people and I want to leave them better than I found them. And I've noticed that a lot of people do not know how to handle it when you are just straight up. And when you say, hey, I don't want to talk about this anymore, or like I'm going to leave this conversation because you've just talked at me for 20 minutes and you haven't asked me a single question and now I'm really drained. Like I've noticed that people can feel really rejected, really hurt. There's so much social anxiety in the world. Like interacting is fucking hard for a lot of people. And so I don't want to make anyone feel worse or slighted or uncomfortable. And so my challenge has been to like still be really clear, but deliver it in a gentle and kind way. And so I'm still kind of like having to put myself out by like, making sure the way I phrase it and how I approach it is in a way that's going to be received well by the other person, but I'm also advocating for my needs. And it's taken me a really long time to find that balance, but I think there is a way of doing it. And I see it as like a public service because we're teaching the normies how to receive what they actually would usually receive as rejection or criticism, but like receive it as like helpful feedback and critique, so that they're a little bit more self-aware themselves. Yeah, and I think that that's like, something that I'm like privileged to be able to do. I have like just enough spoons usually to kind of do that. And I've found like, yeah, it's really exhausting when you're super worried about like making the other person feel shitty or uncomfortable, but like it's so not worth it to make yourself feel shitty and uncomfortable, instead. And I think it's just a cool, like, it's happened quite a bit recently where, I've kind of just had to be like, I guess highlight to people like, oh, it's sort of, and I'll pose it as a question, like, do you feel uncomfortable with silence when you're with other people? Like, do you feel the need to fill the silence? And they'll kind of reflect and be like, oh yeah, actually. And, I just sort of reflect that it sort of feels like they're talking for the sake of talking. And actually, like, I quite enjoy a bit of comfortable silence. And, if I'm stuck in the car with someone for 4 hours, I've sort of said like, hey, you actually haven't asked me a single question. This doesn't feel like a two-way street. And as a bit of an introvert, that really drains me and it doesn't make me feel like you're curious at all. And that doesn't make me feel curious about you. I feel like you're just waffling on for no reason. And not everyone can handle that. But yeah, I think the way that I've managed to do it has been really valuable for a lot of people. So that could be a little incentive to kind of galvanize people into action when you are in a situation, if it feels safe to do so. Like sometimes that kind of reflection can be really helpful for people to know. And, you can frame it like, hey, I'm neurodivergent or I'm introverted or I actually have these needs and I would love it if you could be on my team here and cater to those needs a little bit more because currently I'm fucking catering to your needs.
Could I offer a hot take challenge to that thought process?
Totally.
I wonder if you just started talking about yourself, what would happen? Because what it sounds like, and this is me making an assumption based off like 30 seconds of information. I wonder if the people that are doing that to you are making an internal assumption that you're just going to share information because that's how they're communicating. Because everyone has a difference in communication style. There are some people that will just state information for the sake of like sharing information. And then there are people that are more socially oriented. So they want to have that back and forth, reciprocal kind of chat. Varies across communication style, but I'd be curious if you're still overcompensating slightly. And it sounds like you've got the wording perfect though, like on what you need, which I love. But I'd be curious if you just started sharing information about you, what would happen in that circumstance, and if they would actually then take a pause to just listen and attune to what you're saying, and whether that would actually be something that would happen. I'm not sure if you've done that or trialed it or tested it, because there are some people that just blatantly want to talk about themselves. And, that's where we can put the foot down and be like, hey, I'm tapping out on the conversation now, versus what happens when you do something different for yourself and what is the response from there. Because if they receive that, like, oh, yeah, keep speaking. Like, okay, then I'd wonder if it was just you making an assumption about their communication style too.
Totally. I've definitely experimented. Some people just, you start talking and they almost immediately direct it back to themselves and kind of hijack the conversation. And then there's people that are just uncomfortable with silence. And if I'm not in a talkative mood, they will then take it upon themselves to fill the silence so it's not awkward, or because they feel like they're doing that on behalf of me in order to carry the conversation. And I'll just point out, like, there's no need to do that. I'm comfortable with silence and I actually need it. Often these situations happen when, I don't even want to talk to them. Like, it's not like I'm bummed out that I'm not getting to talk and I couldn't just insert myself and start talking. I totally could. Most of the time it's because I don't want to be there and I don't want to be talking to them, but I have to.
I understand.
And I've kind of based my life around only having and it's so funny. I feel like such a bitch. I'm so antisocial, but I've based my life around only really having to interact with people that I choose to and that I like and that top me up. And so I've become increasingly rigid and intolerant of things, of situations like socially that I don't want to be in and don't see any point in, which is something that I feel a bit of shame around and a bit of judgment around. Like, I'm just this like rude antisocial bitch that doesn't care about people. I'm not curious about people, but also like I just don't have the spoons to care about, like, the people that I do converse with and that I care about. And, through my job, through the podcast, through so many facets of my life, I am talking a lot. I'm socializing a lot. I'm interacting a lot. I'm giving out a lot of energy. And so, yeah, when I am thrown into a situation, whether it's, through work or something that means I have to spend a prolonged amount of time with someone, or even if I just get like trapped at a party speaking to someone, I'm just like, fuck this. I can't be bothered. Nor should I have to. Like, I feel very protective of my energy, I suppose. And I'm not about to make small talk for the sake of it, So if I do feel a bit cornered in those situations, that's probably what's happening, is like I'm potentially misunderstanding their communication style, and I'm also just fucking bone dry. I just don't want to be there.
Yeah, and I don't think it's selfish, just to make a little side note, to be selective. It's not selfish to be selective, particularly with your energy and your space. You are entitled to accessing and spending time with who you want and conserving your energy how you want. Small talk is exhausting for many of us. I think that's pretty fair. You don't have to engage in the social chit chat if that's something that you don't want to do. There is a purpose to doing that for neurotypicals in their communication. Like, small talk, the purpose is to build up small bouts of intimacy to then go deeper. Usually with neurodivergence, we jump right in, and that depth is met. And so there is always purpose in communication, but if it's something that's not resonating with you, then you don't need to do it. That's okay. And I think it's important to recognize that you can step away from neuronormative impositions that have been placed on us that don't necessarily hold validity in the context of your social relationships and interactions.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think the judgment on myself and the shame around it comes from comes from living in a really neurotypical kind of system, and also having, in the past, very golden retriever energy extroverted boyfriends, where I would have to like take a separate car to every event and party because I knew that I would always want to leave before then.
Yep, I've been there. Yep.
Yep. So that added to the like feeling of like there's something wrong with me and I'm the stick in the mud and whatever. But I think like I really find it so beautiful and admirable when you hear from people who are like they literally move in the world with the attitude of like, everyone has a story, everyone is interesting if you find the right thing to talk to them about, just this curiosity. People who are very curious and who are just so open and warm and willing to give everyone a shot and to do the work to kind of excavate whatever small talk they have to find common ground. Like, I just find it so cool, those people that are able to do that with anyone, and they're always excited to talk to a new person, classic like backpacker energy, where they're like, everyone's got something to say and I want to get to know them. And this is such a privilege to have just chat with like different diverse people. And I'm like, oh my God, I hate people, but I love people. But I feel very conflicted because that's not me. I'm not necessarily always curious or down for a chat. And then I feel bad because I kind of wish I was. Like, I think that's a beautiful way to live and to see the world and to see people. And I think we're becoming increasingly isolated and siloed and, antisocial. And I feel sad about that. And also I contribute to that.
Two things can exist at the same time. I think there's room for both of those. And I understand what you were saying before about like kind of wanting or admiring people that have that energy and capacity in them. Different bandwidths for different people, right? They're probably people that are curious to listen rather than talk as well, which means that they're not actually releasing much about themselves, which takes a lot of less energy than doing the mutual listen and talk exchange. There are different skill sets and different strengths and different people in their social temperaments and like needs. So maybe your battery just drains or fills at a quicker or slower rate. We all have different social temperaments at the end of the day. And so as much as we can admire some traits in others, there are probably traits that you have, like having boundaries. Maybe those people just actually don't know what to say, so they're just holding space to listen. And don't know how to feel. Like there's different strengths in the way that we communicate. So I understand the internal shame, but just a reminder as well that there are skill sets that you possess that other people probably don't and that wish the same in you. And that boundariedness is really important, particularly with the state of the world. Like I know that whole hyper-individualization and this siloing, it is exhausting and we are being isolated. I always say I want to get farmland. I want to live on acreage and have a community, but I want to have my own dwelling that's at least 500 meters away from the community because I need to be alone. I love my solitude more than anything. And so I would love a community of humans that don't always interact with me. And that's exactly what I do in my day-to-day life. And so I think that it's important to even recontextualize it. You can have community, even if it's in a smaller pocket, that's equally as fulfilling, that meets your needs, where you're not having to go to all of these extreme lengths in conversation too and be satiated. And that's actually enough. And also just a quick shout out to the book, The Service Berry, because that's been getting me out of this whole siloed individualization mindset with how we can have like gift economy instead of market economy. And that's just opened my mind recently. My brain, I recommend it. Great read.
Awesome. So good. And I guess like in that vein, I wanted to ask about different relationship styles. Like, do neurospicy folk suit more of a non-traditional style of relating, or do they tend to gravitate towards like non-monogamy or relationship anarchy? Or is it pretty just similar across the board? Like, what are your thoughts on relationship style?
So we tend to be on either extremes more often than not with the couples and the partners and the polycules that I see. So we are more likely to veer into non-traditional relationship orientations just as from the get-go. That's probably because neuronormative stuff doesn't always apply to us. And, neuroqueering as its own term as well. We have a beautiful overlap with our queer community and neurodivergent community. It's pretty much not a Venn diagram, but a circle. So there's lots of different kinds that I do see. I see the brunt of it more often than not, the partnerships that are struggling, right? So I'm sure that there are plenty of partnerships that are thriving and doing well outside of therapy, because why would you go to therapy otherwise? But I see kink, Poly, open relationships, relationship anarchy is dominant in some. And then on the other extreme, I've got hardcore monogamists. And I think so when I say it's kind of on either end, it's because it really is two sides of the same coin in that we tend to operate on I don't want to go to the rules. I want something that allows me to be my full authentic self versus I want to follow the rules and this feels good for me. I think the difference is that it's conscious monogamy. Across all of the monogamous partnerships that I do work with, there is a consciousness that's put with it, which I think that makes it a little bit more palatable for those that are engaging with it.
Yeah, cool. And just because I forgot to return to it,
Yeah.
I really want to talk about the concept of pockets as like a practical strategy for couples. Can you explain to us what that is? I know that's a concept that you've come up with to like resource your clients with.
Yes. So pockets are like little team huddles, really, which I really love. So pockets is in like a pocket of time or a pocket window where before you're going out to a big dinner, it's pretty much used in transitions. So if you're going to be with your partner and you're maybe going to a dinner or you're going to a party or you're about to come home from a party, those kinds of settings, anything where you're in transition with your partner, it's a quick check-in. Hey, what's our safe word if we need to get out? What are we going to do if one of us wants to stay and one of us wants to go? How do we navigate this if, we're getting dysregulated? It's essentially that brief window of time where you're checking in. You might even have a moment of co-regulation where, hand on heart, taking a breath just to be conscious and present with one another. It's just that brief mini window because more often than not, and I love that you've identified that you would take separate cars with your partners because not many people know that they need to do that. But that would be an opportunity where it's before we transition to the party, what's going to happen if one of us needs to go? What's going to happen if one of us really wants to stay, but there's only one car? What are the parameters that we're going to set for safety to keep both of us or all of us, depending on your partnership orientation, in a space where we all feel comfortable to communicate our needs and feel that we're being received safely as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, because oh my God, trying to hash that shit out in a public setting when you're dysregulated and you're like, you've hit your wall and you're like, I need to be fucking home right now and I don't want to sit in the car and I don't want to like there's nowhere I can be right now other than home. Like, holy shit. And you've got like, a partner that's like having the best time and so like, and you don't want to ruin their time. Oh,
Humans, so I really do understand that. And I'm just sitting here with like my hot water bottle and I'm like, motherfucker, stop being the fucking life of the party. The party's fucking dead. And if it's not now, I'm about to kill it. Like, fucking come on. So I resonate.
oh my God.
Considered or perceived as the bad guy as well, when
Mhm.
objectively in those circumstances too, sometimes the partner has gone on a dopamine excitement and actually neglected the need or the agreement that has happened, which I think is hard because when things are public, people really do like to villainize and set a good guy and a bad guy. And I think that when you're in public settings, that's just putting us into more privy situations where that can happen. And it's not to say that that's good or bad. It's just not comfortable, particularly if you are someone that is more introverted or a bit more blunt. It then paints you in a light, unfortunately, in a social context as someone that's tainting fun. And that's not a nice thing to carry. Just in the same way that, if your partner really, really does love hanging out with people, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think those pockets are really great opportunities for you to get clarity on what's going to happen, especially if you're going to have any drugs or substances beforehand. How are we going to navigate this so that we don't have to do the public thing where people decide to assign labels to either of us and really we respect the container that is our relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. Because, there's nothing more traumatic. Like, I had some shocker experiences, like, in my last relationship. He's extroverted, ADHD. I would be more introverted. I'm social, but I'm more introverted as we're discovering potentially autistic as well. And dear, oh dear, it was fucked. Sometimes it was just completely fucked. And I hated feeling like a ball and chain. Like, I hated that. And this growing kind of resentment and lack of safety within the container of the relationship when it felt like, his needs would always sort of be put before mine. And then if mine were put first, I would feel really guilty or like this kind of buzzkill. Yucky, yucky, yucky. And I feel like in society, it's a lot more rewarded to be extroverted and social, life of the party, than it is to be, the quote unquote like black cat girlfriend, especially if it's like, if you're the girl, like it's so easy to villainize the girl for being a ball and chain or being, the fun police. So that took me fucking ages to figure out that dynamic. Anyway, what are some things that you would really love? And that probably would have been one of mine, but what are some things you would love people to know about neurodiversity, autism and ADHD specifically, that like people don't often understand, and if they did, they might, have a little bit more compassion.
So I think understanding threshold differences. So it's easier when we say things like, I'm a Virgo or I'm an introvert. They are weirdly more palatable than I am autistic. And just understanding that there's a variation with our energy capacity. I think that that's a really big one. So for example, being really, really social, but then shutting down for several hours when you come home is not typical. That is more likely an autistic trait. Sometimes it can be introversion, but I think just knowing that those bars exist. The other bit as well is that it's not intentional. And I say that with fucking everything with the neurotypes in mind. So it's not intentional. If we're chronically late, if we're chronically early, if you are chronically anything, that should be an indicator that that's not you being an unreliable person. That's genuinely to do with your neurotype. And that's where I actually had a lot of compassion for my ex-partner, very heavily ADHD dominant as well. He was late to everything. And his ex-partner, when we were partnered at the time, would always say, like, you're so unreliable, you're always late, you're never on time. And my brain was like, yeah, should we maybe look at the theme that if this person is always late, technically that's reliable for one, because it's reliably late. If every single time, just on a semantic value, saying, but look at people, it's not intentional. You can, like, witnessing my partner in real time trying to get anything done in the morning when there's a time crunch. I'm like literally looking, I'm like, you are technically doing all the things you need to be doing and you have no concept of how this is working. Like, I'm genuinely shocked witnessing you in this moment. And so I think for me, it's not intentional. Even with like info dumps, I love to info dump. I'm sometimes that person that maybe doesn't ask about you, not because I don't care, but because if I'm rambling about my special interests, then you're fucked. You're not going to get a word in. That's just how it is. Now you need to as well. If you don't want to, then tap out. But like, it's not intentional. I'm not trying to override you in a conversation. I'm not trying to interrupt you. I just have a thought, and if I don't get it out, then I'm going to forget it. I'm not intentionally trying to cause all of this grief and disruption. And I think that's really common for a lot of AuDHDers who are just trying their best in social and interpersonal settings to do things. That being said, impact versus intention is still important too. So your intention might not be to hurt people, but your impact might be that you still do. And so I think, we take that with a grain of salt. That's the power of discernment, right? Something might not be an intention, but you still hurt people. Give the benefit of the doubt is where I always say. I'm a very big person on lending grace where grace is needed. I have like a 2 to 3 part rule on grace. The first one is I give everyone grace the first time round. Second time, I'm now clocking a pattern, and if it happens a third time and it's really not resonant with me, then it's a bye-bye. If it is understandable, like in this context of reliability, if you've been late 3 times, I'm not going to like drop a friendship. I don't care that much. It's more like, okay, well, I just need to recognize that you're going to be late from now on. And so it's either a take it or leave it kind of situation. Is this something that's like morally, ethically going to really, really take it out of me every single time that I interact with you? Or is it something I can live with and I'm just a little bit uncomfortable and then I can actually just adjust my expectations?
Yeah. Awesome. Love that. I'm definitely guilty of being like very rigid and really taking it personally when people are late all the time. The similar deal with my ex, and it just made me feel like, yeah, not safe, not able to trust or rely on or depend on him. But the more I started learning about ADHD, the more I was like, oh, holy shit, this is like a feature that he can't help. And I suppose there's lots of ways where like sneaky little bits of ableism just like shows up in that
Yeah.
like my expectations and standards of someone are based on a neurotypical kind of model. What are some other common ways that ableism shows up either in neurotypical folk or like even, you know, internalized ableism of neurospicy folk? Excuse this quick interruption. I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab. And the more people who get to hear it, the more people I can help with it. Reviews and ratings actually do make a big difference to this little independent podcaster. And it's really easy to just quickly show your support by taking that simple act of either leaving 5 stars for the show on Spotify or even better, writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're a real overachiever, you can do them both. That would be mad. If you're writing a review, though, just be sure to use G-rated words because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't make it through the gates. Lame. Anyway, I would personally recommend doing that right now while you remember, just to get on top of it and let me know you're with me on this journey. Thanks, gang. Enjoy the rest of the epi.
So internalized ableism is probably the hugest thing. Like I personally, the neurotypical ableism, I just leave it because it's there. It's
Everywhere.
more blatant and obvious and explicit in its nature. But the internalized ableism, so you know, you have an expectation on time. I'd go down that rabbit hole further and go, okay, well, do you have that pressure and expectation of yourself? Why? Dig deeper. Have you been late historically? Has that been punished out of you? Or are you someone that just really, really likes to be early and on time because you value it? And so then I would look at are we just holding people to your standard versus, you know, what's more broadly accepted versus what's, you know, reasonable, all of those different paradigms. The other internalized ableism too, seeing a partner as like dopamine seeking constantly when maybe they're just happy and excited. That tends to be a really, really big one that a lot of us that are a bit more, I'm going to say controlled, whether it's an internal locus of control or not, you know, we might see people as more hedonistic and be a bit more judgy on that. That's still a form of internalized ableism. I know that I'm privy to that one a lot. I witnessed that in previous partners, and that's been a really big trigger for me. And that's because my hedonistic behaviors were shamed, and me going after things excitedly was shamed. So I've done a lot of like self-work around that. But that's still something that can come up. Other internalized ableism might be an expectation of, oh, but you could do this the other day. How come you can't do it now? So that's a really big one that I see with couples, particularly with the domestic load, like I've talked about. So in the instance of partnerships, usually we have an ADHD dominant and an autistic dominant pairing. That's just what usually happens. Doesn't mean that there's no ADHD on either side. Doesn't mean there's no autistic traits on the other side either, just dominant features. And so one thing that I'll see is, you know, a partner that's like, oh, but you remember when I've done this, this, and this and told you to do this, but you can't remember this every single time. And then that is the key point. It's a yes, because we have variable and inconsistent, like our disabilities are dynamic and variable in nature, which means our capacity, our ability to hold information, all of these things are variable and based on so many different factors within the environment that if we don't have the environment set up to us to support us, it's not going to be supported. I hear a lot of partners, oh my God, but at work, this partner is able to do all the things. I'm like, yeah, because that's called scaffolding. They know what they need to do with work. You've not scaffolded your home. And so it takes a lot of, like I said before, deconditioning to go, how are we actually being ableist even in our home? Like you're having an expectation that your partner can do this just because you can. Just because you can does not mean you can generalize and expect your partner to. And just because they can sometimes doesn't mean they're going to always be able to. And look, there's a very, very clear distinction between weaponized incompetence and disability. And I want to make sure that that's explicitly stated too, because sometimes it is just weaponized incompetence. I'm going to also point out a little thing around socialization. A lot of AFAB body humans, we have been socialized. We have been socialized into how to keep up a home, how to make sure we look after people's feelings and talk. That's why a lot of autistic AMAB people can be more curt and tactless. They're allowed to get away with it because they weren't socialized as such. That's why it's more abrasive when an AFAB-bodied person does. And so socialization is huge. Would I say weaponized incompetence? Sometimes. Sometimes it's just blatant incompetence because they've never been taught. And that means that they need to learn, which means, especially when disability is playing a factor, we need to create scaffolds because they need to have them in place in order to remember the things. And so, yeah, a lot of unpacking internalized ableism is a huge part of therapy, actually. I didn't even realize until I've been speaking about it. Yeah, it's massive.
Wow, that's so fucking fascinating. Can you give an example of like a really practical way of scaffolding that's like a common one that you help support couples to do for each other?
So a really big one, so similar to radar meetings, like with what polyam couples and relationship anarchists can use, I call them relationship meetings because they're like business meetings. And it's a scaffold. It has a moment for co-regulation. It asks you what you did well, asks you how you'd like to be loved a little bit more in the week. And going through the practicalities, I find that that's a really nice scaffold for couples and partners to be able to discuss with each other how they want the week to look, how they want to kind of unpack things. Another form of scaffolding is a resource list of mental load inventory, writing it down. What's in your mental load so that it's actually out onto paper, and then going, who would feel better to be assigned this, that it's more realistic, whether it's on sensory preferences, memory, whatever domain that you might struggle with. It's important to highlight that. And what's a bare minimum? So if you're not going to be able to clean the house 3 times a week, okay, well, what's the bare minimum that you genuinely can apply? And that might be, I can't do all the benches and all the dishes, but I can stack the dishwasher. And I might be able to use like an antiseptic wipe instead of spraying it down and then giving it a thorough wipe. What's the bare minimum capacity that you can do it? And what's the reasonable expectation? And getting partners to like unpack that kind of work together takes out the mental load just being on one person, but it creates that collaborative process, which I think couples and partners are often missing. They forget to collaborate. It's usually oh, well, I do it this way. Why can't you just do it that way? It's like, because you're not thinking about the different disability needs that you both respectively have. So how can we actually do this together? I do it this way. Is this going to work for your brain? Is this a system that actually works? If not, we need to rewrite the entire system. Maybe you don't like clutter, but your partner's a bit messy. Okay, cool. So maybe we get doom boxes and we just throw all of the stuff that's on the floor into the box and put it away. So the clutter's gone, but the mess is still all in one space so that the person that's likely to forget where all the things are can know at least a designated location for it.
A doom box. I've never heard that. Oh my God.
They're great. Doom boxes, doom drawers, doom bowls, have them fucking everywhere. Insight in mind. That's also the big thing, especially for ADHD, is we forget where shit is all the time. We've got that specific memory of, oh, yes, I have an elastic that's like underneath this bed frame on this like specific leg. But if you moved it, fuck knows if we know where it is. So our brains have different ways of organizing. So if you create doom bowls and shove all of your shit in one space, it reduces the fucking visual clutter that's around it, but it's in the designated space. It's easier because it's insight in mind. You can go, oh, yes, that's where it is, as opposed to having it tucked away, labeled, and you're like, where the fuck did I put anything?
Oh my God, epic. All right, great. Very practical strategies. Do you have time for a TMI story?
Yeah, sure.
TMI, we love it. TMI, we love it.
Well, there's so many. Oh, gosh. Well, my TMI story is actually going to be the fun story. It's a 2-part story of how I lost my virginity because I think it's
Love it.
I'm actually thinking back, maybe it's not. So I'm just going to preface with this is TMI, but it might not be funny. I count it as a 2-part story because firstly, you don't lose virginity. That's not a whole thing, just as the preface from the get-go. But hymens stretch sometimes without having sex, and without penetrative sex, more specifically in this instance too. And so I was technically 12 when I lost my virginity, if we're going by the standard of the book, which is your hymen stretching. I was actually riding a bike, and that's how I actually thought that I had gotten my period. I did not. I had just stretched my hymen. And my dad planted a tree. And so that was a really, really bizarre thing to happen. And it turns out it wasn't even my period. So that was a very awkward conversation to then unpack. And then my dad got me this Kaz cookbook called Girl Stuff, which was like my little Bible. But he was like, oh, yes, here you go. You can learn all about that away from me. I just think it's really funny because he planted a tree.
So sweet.
Yeah, he's a very poetic.
Period tree.
Yeah, and that's a big ass tree now in the backyard of somewhere in Elderslie, like in New South Wales. So I'd love to see if it's still around. But yeah, so that was like the first part. And then the second part was I wanted to lose my virginity for someone that I had a feeling for. They didn't like me. And then the person that I was friends with was like, I'll help out. That sounds fine. Used a phone light to find my vulva, which is so funny. Like that was my first exposure. And I'm just like, and I was just sitting there awkwardly like, I don't know what's happening. And it was just so awkward. And at that point I was clearly not aroused. I was like, my body was like, what is happening? I just gave old mate a good pat on the back and I'm like, you know what? We should probably go back inside.
Oh,
Consensual, just to make sure that's clear. But it was just such an awkward and the opposite of arousing. I felt like I was at a doctor's gyno appointment with like the phone light going on and everything. So for me, I was like, you know what? Tried and true. The books sound way better. We're good. I'm happy here. Tapping out.
God. So he got the phone light out to kind of locate the landmarks
Exactly.
and then figure out where to put the penis in, and then did the penetration bit, and you were just kind of like were you kissing, like, or was it very mechanical?
We were kissing, but it was still mechanical, and I was just like, you know what? Should have brought lube. Body's not aroused.
Yeah.
Like I was ready, but like body wasn't. Non-arousal, arousal non-concordance being a thing.
Yeah.
I was just like, you know what? I'm good. I already lost my virginity actually when I was 12, and that was
I got a tree.
yeah.
Oh my God, that's an epic story. Thank you. And like pretty freaking cool one that you were like, because I would have been like disgustingly uncomfortable with anyone looking at my vulva up close. So
Yeah.
like the fact that you let him do that is like amazing, because imagine like what an experience that would have been for him in terms of like just an educational, I mean, I'm sure he fucking, looked at porn or whatever, but to get to do that, to really have a good proper squiz about what's going on down there, because there's so many stories about, them trying to put it in the wrong hole or trying to just being kind of a little bit confused about where everything is. So that's pretty cool that you allowed him to have that experience.
I think I was so neutral. Maybe this is the autistic thing, just not realizing that that's not I know it's a unique experience, but just thinking very nonchalantly about it. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I've never perceived it that way, which is kind of beautiful. You just turned that part of the story into a very nice way of framing. I just saw it as a, old mate's lost. Might figure it out as he's here because there's only so much guiding I can do. Like, this is my first time, mate. Like,
Oh my God, amazing. Okay, well, I know that we've gone way over time. Is there anything you want to leave us with just to kind of tie a bow on it? Maybe a way that we can make, our neuroqueer friends and partners feel more seen. Maybe a common myth or misconception that you want to debunk. Like, what else do we need to sort of tie into this episode to complete it? Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. And I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later.
I don't know if it's a myth buster, but maybe more of a hypothesis. AuDHDers probably were the ones that initiated the kink scene. And that's a theory / hypothesis of mine, purely based on you've got clear designated scripts, roles, aftercare, the predictability of what's going to happen, what to expect. You've got sometimes people who want more sensory seeking versus sensory deprivation. It sounds like a whole bunch of AuDHDers got real excited and decided to find some ways to increase or decrease their stimulation without having the awkwardness with communication with partners.
And you have to be really upfront and blunt about your communication prior to the experience.
You need to go through this whole process, and it has such clear, definitive roles. Consent is clear. I just think that the AuDHDers probably were the pioneers. Not to say that, holistic and neurotypical people don't engage in kink. They definitely do. But I do think the AuDHDers were probably the pioneers of that venture.
I would completely back that. That's hilarious that you say that, because it's definitely come up on this podcast before. I interviewed a fairy. I don't know if you've heard of the kink fairy, and obviously all the interviews with Hannah and stuff and various BDSM and kink folk. It definitely features in a lot of the conversations. And yeah, it's exactly as you say. It's kind of built for people with, diverse neurotypes and sensory needs and things like that. So yeah, that is a hot take, and it is, I back it. I fully back it.
The science
Amazing.
In 10, 15 years, there'll be a whole bunch of literature about how we started this. It's fine.
Totally. Yeah, you heard it here first. Thank you so much, Lil. It's been awesome to chat with you. I'll definitely have to do another follow-up one. I feel like we've just sort of skimmed the surface of a lot of this stuff. But yeah, as the awareness grows, we can delve in a bit deeper to some more specific aspects. But yeah, really appreciate all of your expertise and your lived experience that you've shared with us today. I'll put your work, courses, links, all of that in the show notes. You've also got a discount for Labia Lounge listeners, 30%. That is generous. Usually people only give a 10%.
That's for the first month.
That's still great. First month of what? Do you want to just explain?
Yeah. My Neurokinnection Intimacy Alchemy Intimacy Portal. Which is for lovers of any variation. You can be straight, queer, trans, relationship orientation of any sort. It's just for autistic ADHDers. That's the more primary thing that's important. Looking about communication patterns, parenting and intimacy, sex and desire and intimacy, dating and conscious and intentional dating, relationship communication, rupture repair. It covers everything. It's I spent over a year creating this portal. So I'm hyping it up for the reason that it fucking took
yeah.
it's a labor of love, where you get also, because it's a subscription, every second month I do a webinar that you get access to for free, which will go out into the public at a cost, with constant uploading of resources, fortnightly blogs, reviews, details, all of that kind of stuff. So it's really fucking comprehensive, but that's my labor of love.
That sounds incredible. Yeah, so dope. I love that you've created such a comprehensive resource like that. So needed. I'll be plugging that everywhere I go because, yeah, there's just an increasing number of people that are realizing finally that they are AuDHD, and especially people around me. So who knows? Maybe I'll jump on that platform.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it, darling hearts. Thanks for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. If you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch because that's a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism, and you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. I'm also always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, questions or guest suggestions, so feel free to get in touch via my website or over on Insta. You can also send me in TMI stories to be shared anonymously on the pod. My handle is FreyaGraf_the Labia Lounge. If my account hasn't been deleted for being too sex positive, which, is always a possibility with censorship. But just in case the chronic censorship finally does obliterate my social channels, I'd highly recommend going and joining my mailing list and snagging yourself some fun freebies for the trouble at www.freyagraf.com/freebies. Anyway, later, labial legends. See you next time.